We are in the second week of a message series in the Old Testament in the book of Haggai. We're calling this series The Best Is Yet to Come. And I gave the quick backstory on this book last week, but if you missed last week, I want to give you the even quicker backstory, okay? So this is going to help us understand. When we understand the backstory, it helps us understand the main story, right? And then we're going to dive into this second week of this series. And last week we talked all the way back to when King Solomon built for God the most magnificent temple really that's ever been created. It was mind-blowing. I just would have loved to just be able to see this temple in all of its glory. People came from all over the world to be able to worship God and show him honestly, show him honor, and honestly to be a part of this and to see it would have just been amazing. And unfortunately, we know that after King Solomon died, the people of God just kind of turned to other things. And what happened is they started worshiping these other false idols. And eventually their decisions led them down some roads. And it ended up, the temple ended up getting destroyed in the year 587 under the rule of King Nebuchadnezzar. And so the Babylonian army under his direction, they level the temple and just took over the people of God. The Babylonians, they took the Jewish people into captivity for 5 decades. So for 50 years, they're in this captivity. And so you can only imagine the sense of relief and hope that for the first time in 50 years, a remnant of them is allowed to go back to their homeland to make something of it, to try and start the rebuild process. And if you can just imagine that 50 years, and just thinking back, being like, okay, if you're one of those 50,000 people who are allowed to go back, it's like, do I even remember, what was there or anything like that? And so 50,000 people, they go back to rebuild. The first priority was to go back and rebuild the house of God. And so they go back, they start rebuilding the temple, right? They got the foundation in place, they get the altar set up, they get some of the important things put in place, and then they're met with some resistance. And what do? They just quit. They throw in the towel just as fast as they started. They give up. And for 14 years, in addition to the 50, it's just unfinished with no progress. And so God raises up the prophet Haggai to call the people back to the task. He says, don't just focus on your houses, focus on God's house. Let's put God first. And that's where we're going to pick up this morning with that context in mind. Haggai chapter 1, verses 13 and 14. If you don't have a Bible with, you can follow along on the screen. It says, then Haggai, the Lord's messenger, gave this message of the Lord to the people. Let's all say this next part together. He says, I am with you, declares the Lord. We'll come back to that thought. Verse 14. So the Lord stirred up the spirit of Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and the spirit of Joshua, son of Jozadak. That was a lot of hard names. The high priest, and the spirit of the whole remnant of the people. They came and began to work on the house of the Lord Almighty, their God. How does this often work in our own lives? God will often put something on our hearts that stirs us up towards something that we know he's calling us to accomplish on his behalf, right? He gives you hope to accomplish that thing in which he has put on your heart. That's what he did here. He gave them a sense of faith that we're supposed to rebuild this like we looked at last week, right? And he stirs up their spirits and he says, now's the time to get moving. The best is yet to come, but the time to start is now. And this is what's going to happen to a lot of those of us who would consider ourselves followers of Jesus. There are going to be those times, like seemingly out of the blue, where it's like, this is what I'm called to accomplish, whatever this is, right? I'm called to accomplish this. And you have the faith to start that thing, right? And you want to just go for it. And that's because God has stirred up your spirit towards that thing. The story goes this way. They came, they got together. They begin to rally up. They're like, okay, we're going to rebuild. We're going to keep moving. We can do this. We're going to build this amazing temple. We're going to restore the glory that once was. We can do this. The first week, they're excited. They keep moving. The second week, we've been at it. We're kind of rusty, but we're moving forward. We're making progress. Third week, they're keeping going. Fourth week, they quit. 1 month in, we can do this. We can do this. 1 month in, we quit. They fizzle out. They had one of their big religious festivals, and all the people gathered around this temple, and they're like, this is it? This is all you got? Like, this is pathetic. This isn't much progress. And all of a sudden, everybody's discouraged and they're embarrassed. They're like, we're trying our best, right? This is what we do oftentimes. We get excited about that thing. We go all in. We fizzle out. We're trying our best, okay? We got some opposition. We didn't know what to do. We built it to the wrong spec. I don't know if we weren't as good as we thought we were going to be. We just, for whatever reason, we quit. And let's be honest. How many of us, it's easy to point a finger, right? How many of us, how often does this happen in our own lives? We're going to do this, we're going to go for it, and then we flame out before we really ever get any traction anywhere. I have a friend who I used to work with, and this was like, we would joke because like this is like story of his life, and he's the kind of guy who like he gets an idea and he just goes all in on this idea. He doesn't test drive the car, read the reviews, compare it to all the other cars in the class. He just goes and buys the car and just like hucks it and hopes for the best, right? And now this works great when it works. But there are other times where it just, so all of us are like, okay, you got the car. All right, cool. We'll encourage you. And so one day he was like, you guys, I'm going to run a marathon. And we're like, bro, do you run? He's like, well, not yet, but I'm gonna work up to it. When's the marathon? It's in 2 months. All right. Well, why don't you start with like a 5K or maybe like one lap around the track by the school. Like we'll see how that goes. He's like, I'm gonna do this. I'm all in. I'm gonna do this. I already bought the shoes. They cost me $150. The little tracker. It's like a little tracker. This was before we had iPhones that would do all that. So it's like a little chip that goes in your shoe and it communicates with a little bracelet on your hand. And so he got all that and he starts his training for this marathon that's coming up in 2 months, and he's just instantly all in on this idea, and he progressed pretty fast. So he got to the point where he's running like 10 miles at a time, like 3 or 4 days a week, and he realized at this point like how much sacrifice this was actually going to take for him, and so the thing is, all of us who were his friends, we were kind of holding off taking vacation time and going, it was going to be in Bismarck. We're going to go there and cheer him on. But none of us actually went and did that because we're like, is he actually going to do this? Kind of glad that we didn't book that trip because he got to the point where it was like a few weeks out. He's like, I can't run more than 10 miles at a time. And he quit. He gave up on his marathon, never ended up happening, never did. He's just like, I don't know what that was about. I don't run anymore. If anyone wants some shoes, I got some shoes, but and a little tracking deal. But we're all like that to some degree, aren't we? We can just go for it. We can do this. We can build this temple. We can build this temple. 1 month later, back then, like to the day, because they dated everything, 1 month later, they completely flame out. And I don't know what this is for you. We're going to get out of debt. We're going to get out of debt. We're going to get out of debt. Oh, next month is Christmas. I forgot about that. So maybe that's not going to happen now, right? All right. Or I'm going to go on a diet. I'm going to go on a diet, and this is going to be awesome. You mean they put the bacon right on the donut? I got to take 3 dozen of them. And I'll get in shape, plus chocolate milk too, because you got it. I'll get in shape later, okay? And then we don't make the progress that we think that we can make, And it just leads to complete discouragement, doesn't it? And that's exactly what happens to the people of God. We're going to do this for God. We're going to do this for God. It's going to be awesome. 1 month in, it didn't go the way that they expected, and they got incredibly discouraged. And so God has Haggai ask them this question, and to me, this question is loving. It's almost like God is trying to get to the root of their discouragement. And so if you're here today and you're discouraged because of one of these two reasons we find in this question, this is God answering that discouragement in a loving way. Chapter 2, verse 3, it says, "Who of you is left who saw this house in its former glory? How does it look to you now? Does it not seem to you like nothing?" In other words, he's saying, who of you is old enough to remember Solomon's temple? Wasn't it amazing? Look at yours. How does it look to you now? Does it seem like nothing? So I want to focus on two causes of discouragement this morning, okay? So I want to talk about these today. If you're taking notes, first one is comparisons. The second one is a lack of progress. So comparisons and a lack of progress. Very, very certainly, these people were doing the same thing that we often do in our own lives today where we are now. They were comparing their start with someone else's finish. We just started. Our temple doesn't look very good. Their temple was amazing. In fact, Bible scholars estimate that Haggai was probably in his mid-70s when this was written. And so when he's prophesying to them, he's probably around 75 years old, which means 50 years before, when they're in captivity, he would have been a teenager, certainly old enough to remember the former temple, right? And so it's like, wow, Solomon's temple was amazing. This was fantastic. This one isn't amazing at all. And there's this sense of comparison. I don't know about you, but I can get incredibly discouraged a lot of time when I compare where other people are to where I think maybe I should be. Like maybe you're a guy here today and you look at someone else and you're like, man, that guy's got a great job. He's got an amazing truck. And he's got this great house and a fantastic family. And I hate my job. Not getting paid enough. My car is a jerk. And my dumpy apartment I'm paying $12,000 a month for, it's just not working. Family? What family? I ain't got a family. Or maybe you're a lady and you're comparing not necessarily with some other lady, but maybe you're comparing her kids versus your kids, right? And her kids, they go to school in the perfect matching outfits, and they go there with baked goodies every day in their lunchbox with a little note in there, and they've got college credit already at like 8 years old, somehow accumulated, and you're like, my kids are barely dressed. I'm pretty sure they had pants on today. They forgot their lunchbox again, and they're failing recess. I don't know what it is, and you feel bad, right? And then you want to feel like a massive loser, and so then you go on Facebook and you're like, well, she was invited and nobody invited me, and he's traveling again for the third time this year. I can't even afford to go to the gas station. She's got more likes on her picture. I posted the same picture and don't have nearly as many likes as she. And suddenly we feel incredibly discouraged, don't we? We're like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And we've compared, just as God's people did, we've compared our little pathetic attempt to build the temple with this glorious, amazing one that was already done a long time ago. And we feel so discouraged. And then there's just a general lack of progress. And this is what they did. We're a month into this, And this isn't going well. We thought that our projections, the contractors are not quite lining up. Like these guys were supposed to be done with the walls before the electricians could get in, even though there's not really electricity yet because it's biblical times and we don't have that. But nonetheless, things aren't lining up. It's not going the way we thought it should have gone. Like by the time we were at this point, we thought we would have been here. And we're not there. And now we're discouraged. This is how we are. We're trying so hard and we're not getting anywhere. And I was going to go on a diet, and I've been on this diet, and I've been eating nothing but kale and almonds, and I gained 2 pounds after 2 months of that. It's like, what happened? I was trying so hard. I'm working out and it's not working. Or you start a business or whatever it is, and it's like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, and then it seems like maybe it's a spiritual lack of progress, and you think, I've been a Christian for all this time, regardless of how long it's been, but all this time, and I still have that struggle. I'm still saying bad words. We're going to worship God. We're driving to church, and we're cussing at each other in the car because of the snow, and we were already late, and now the snow just made it, I don't even know where to park, and now my feet are like snow's in my boots, and it's not good. And so one day you feel like these people did. It's like, I'm not even sure it's worth it anymore. Certainly in a group of people this size, there are people, and this is true in some category of our life right now. We're thinking, I'm giving it all in my marriage. I'm giving it all in my marriage. I'm giving it everything. I'm trying to put up with this person, whatever he or she is doing. And they're not even trying. I don't even know if it's worth trying anymore. So discouraged. I'm giving it my best, and I'm just not getting anything in return. Some of you with your kids, you're praying for your kids, you're giving them great advice, you're doing everything that you can to help push your kids along and help them make good decisions, and you're looking at them and you're like, could you make any worse decisions than what you're making right now? And it's so discouraging because you've tried everything you know, you've read every single book, and it's like it's still not where it should be. And they continue to make decisions that are just devastating, and you can see where they're headed, right? And you're just thinking, I know what they need to do, but they won't listen, and we feel incredibly discouraged. It could be any number of things. Spiritually, you're trying so hard to overcome that one sin, right? And we look back, it's like, I've been walking with Jesus for all this time, but there's still that one sin, and maybe I can't ever overcome that. Maybe it's just not worth it, and you wake up one day and it's just like, I tried, and I'm not there. They tried a little bit, and they're there. They're doing all right, but I'm here. I've been trying harder, and I'm not where they're at. What is the deal? And we're discouraged. We all live with that. And I don't want to whine about things, but I face it myself. Every Sunday after church, my mind will not shut off. I'm like, man, I wasn't clear on that point. I should have said that way instead of saying it that way. And because I said it that way, it changed the whole course of the message. And now I don't know where I'm leading the people in a totally the wrong direction. I was trying to lead them here, and they're going here. And what did I do? And that's just, they call it the pastor's hangover. It's like your mind goes, it just won't shut off. We all feel discouragement in different ways. And I want to show you what God tells his people to do when this is where they are. We're building the temple. It's just not going well. It's never going to be as good as Solomon's temple. We're doing the best we can. The best just isn't good enough. And God gives them the most loving and simple instructions. And to me, it's one of the most beautiful things about this little book tucked away in the Old Testament is just how loving God is. And we find that in there. Remember last week when they're like, we don't know how to build the temple. And God's like, just let me be really, really clear. It's just 3 steps. And God says just basically one step, then you take the second step, and then you take the third step. Here's what you do. He says you go up the mountain, you bring down the timbers, You build my temple, right? And so some of you weren't paying attention, and so I'm going to tell you again because I could do this all day. I like doing this. You go up the mountain, you bring down the timber, and you build my temple. And so he's like, you just do what I told you to do, step by step. You trust that I'm going to be there every step of the way, and it's good. All you got to do is be obedient. You choose the difficult right instead of the easy wrong. This week, we get discouraged. What do we do, God? We're discouraged. We're trying to follow you. It's not working like we thought it would. And watch how loving God is. This is so amazing. He talks first to the governor, and then the high priest. So I have to say these complicated names again, so bear with me, all right? So Haggai 2, verse 4. It says, now be strong, Zerubbabel, declares the Lord. Be strong, Joshua, son of Jozadak, the high priest. Be strong, all you people of the land, declares the Lord, and work, for I am with you, declares the Lord Almighty. He tells Joshua, the first thing, he says, be strong. And then he tells all the people of the land, be strong. What does he tell them to do? He says, be strong. Why? Because he says, hear it again. Because I'm with you, declares the Lord. What do you do when you're discouraged? Basically, God says two things. The first one, be strong. Second one, do the work. He says, be strong, and he says, do the work. Let me say it again because I think somebody wasn't paying attention. What do I do? What do I do? God says, you be strong and do the work. He says, be strong and do the work. When you're discouraged and you want to give up, what do? He says, be strong and do the work. All right, this is cool. The great news is you don't just have to be strong and do the work in your own power by yourself. But we live in New Testament times now. And our New Testament teaches us that when you are weak, his strength is made perfect in your weakness. In other words, I don't just have to be strong based on my own abilities. I've got supernatural strength dwelling within me. That same spirit that raised Christ from the dead lives within those who believe. And so when you are strong, you're not strong on your own. In fact, when you can't do anymore, and when you're wanting to just give up, and when you're in that situation, that's the point where you become a perfect candidate for God's strength to be strong through you. Be strong in the Lord and do the work. Be strong and do the work. What do you do when you're discouraged? You be strong and you do the work. Notice he doesn't say be strong and talk the talk. Notice he doesn't say be strong and dream the dream, or be strong and compare where you are to where they are. He says be strong, do the work. What do you do when you're discouraged? In his power, you be strong and you do the work. You put down a stone. You put down another stone. You put down another stone. And you get it? Another stone. Consistently do the last thing God called you to do. He calls you to do something different, you go do something different. Until he calls you to do something different, you do that which he called you to do most recent. Consistently choose a difficult right over the easy wrong. Consistently do the work. Put down another stone. Put down another stone. Consistently do the difficult thing. It'd be easy to say, we're just not there. I'm going to go home. It'd be easy to say, it just got to be too difficult. There's just not enough progress. But God says, be strong, do the work. Be strong, keep going. And this leads to a principle that I had to really learn to internalize and learn to do something with. I tell myself this all the time. You can tell yourself this as well. Never forget this. Take this to the bank. Successful people do consistently what other people do sometimes. Successful people do consistently what other people do sometimes. What do you do? You show up, and you show up prepared to do the work, to be strong in the Lord. When you want to give up, what do? You be strong and you keep doing the work. You keep praying. You keep praying. You pray some more. You don't see results. You continue to dive into God's word. See what it says. We seek him daily. We be strong and we continue to do the right thing. Even when it doesn't seem like it's getting us anywhere, we keep being strong. We continue to show up prepared and do the work that he's called us to do, even when things aren't necessarily going in the direction that we had hoped for. You be strong, whatever it is for you. Be strong and continue paying off that debt, even if it's like, well, all I can do is $5 a month more than the minimum payment. Well, we keep on doing that week after week, month after month, year after year, and we begin to start seeing some progress in that when we continue to do the right thing in God's strength. You be strong and continue to love when that person you're showing love to isn't necessarily doing anything in return. You be strong and bring your best when everyone on your work crew is just kind of good with status quo. You be strong and you show honor even when the person over you isn't doing anything honorable. You be strong and continue to love your spouse even when your spouse isn't responding at all. You be strong and continue to reach out to that person even though they continue to reject the truth of God. Whatever it is, you be strong and continue to pray for your children. Pray for your children some more. Stand for your children, even when they don't stand for anything that you believe is right and true. You be strong, you show back up. You be strong and you stay in the game. You be strong and you never, ever, ever give up. When we live with that constant discouragement, we can choose to say in the strength of God, I will be strong and I will show up and I will do the work. When I'm discouraged, I have to remind myself that just as real as God is, we have an enemy who's also real and wants nothing more than to see the work of God crumble. And he's crafty. He's good at doing what he does. He's good at accessing those backdoor kind of places into our life where he can get in there and plant those little seeds of doubt. Hey, why are you doing this? Hey, it's not that good. Hey, you really aren't good at, why are you trying? And we have a decision to make. We can choose to listen to that voice or we can stand on the truth of God. We got to continue to seek him. We continue to study his word. There's somebody here you're comparing. I'm not there. I wish I was and I'm discouraged. I don't have any progress. Listen, show back up. Consistently do what other people do sometimes. Put down another stone and put down another stone and then put down another stone. Successful people do consistently what other people do sometimes. Just show back up and do what you know God is calling you to do. Show back up and do what God has called you to do. Be strong and do the work. That's why God's word is so powerful. In Galatians 6, God tells us in the New Testament, let us not become weary in what? In doing good. In other words, don't become weary in doing the work. Why? Because at the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we what? If we do not give up. Be strong. Do the work. We good? All that was the setup. Now it's time for the punchline. We could have ended the message time there. Basically what I would have done is given you a nice go get 'em. You can do it. Get in there. Kind of a thing. It's not a bad message, but it's not a complete message either. So let's make it complete. God says, be strong and do the work. Why? He says, because I am with you, declares the Lord. And so this is the key to all of it. It's not that we're doing this on our own. It's not even what we're doing. It's who's calling us to do it and who's walking with us when we're doing it. What God was going to show them back in this time is the most world-changing news since the beginning of time. If you read ahead, this won't be on the screen, but you can read ahead in chapter 2, verses 6 through 9. And this is what God says. God says something that they can't even wrap their minds around. But God says the glory of this temple, the glory of the present temple is going to be way greater than the glory of the former temple. And they're going, no, God, you must have misspoken. Have you seen Solomon's temple? That was awesome. Have you seen ours? Like ours is like the Pinterest fail, and like that's like the real Pinterest project. Like that's like the inspiration, but like we like nailed it. Like it's not good, and we all know it. In fact, even secular historians will look back and say Zerubbabel's temple wasn't even close to Solomon's temple. There's no way. What are you saying, God? And here's my favorite part. They had no idea that what God was doing was actually foreshadowing the great New Testament truth of his love. See, all through the Old Testament, what happens in the physical is often a picture of what's going to happen in the spiritual. In the New Testament, it's a foreshadow. And so God shows physically what he's going to do spiritually. God shows naturally what he's going to do supernaturally. And here's how. God says, the glory of this present temple will be greater than the glory of the former temple. How could he say that? Because God was going to do something that the people could not imagine. Don't miss this. In the Old Testament, people had to go to the temple with their sacrifice in hopes that that sacrifice is going to make them right with God. Okay? The New Testament, God says something completely crazy to the way that they had been thinking and the way that they've been brought up. He says, now those who are followers of Jesus, you are the temple. You are the temple of the Holy Spirit. You are the house where God dwells. This is the most mind-blowing thought because everybody thought that you had to go to the specific place to experience God in a particular way. And now God says, if you're a follower of my son Jesus, I actually dwell within you. In the Old Testament, you have to go to the temple and make a specific sacrifice following a specific order in hopes that that is going to make you right with God. In the New Testament, God comes to you and he makes that sacrifice so you can be right with him. The Holy Spirit dwells within you. Jesus is the greater glory. Church, I don't think you get this. And I'm not giving up until you do. This changes everything. So now it's not like you just be strong and you do the work on your own. You do it because the Spirit of God is dwelling within you. He is in you, and not only is he in you, but he's with you, and he's serving, he's doing that alongside of you. The truth is, you're never alone. When we do these things, greater is he that is in you than he who is in the world. You are a temple of the Holy Spirit. Jesus dwells within you. The glory of this present temple will be far greater than the glory of the former temple. Jesus is that glory, and he's dwelling within you, the temple. Every time you put a stone down in his name, you're glorifying him. Every time you serve someone, you're glorifying him. Every time you show love to someone, regardless of what they do with that love, you're glorifying him. When you forgive someone, he's being glorified. When you lift up your voice in worship of him like we did earlier, he's being glorified. And here's why we should not be discouraged, because in all of this, we know that we are not alone. We don't have to go to a specific place to make a specific sacrifice in a specific way in hopes of finding God, but rather he comes after us. He gave his son that we would be made right with him. And therefore, Jesus dwells within those who are followers and believers of him. He is the ultimate glory. And that's why you never have to be discouraged, because you are not alone. He is in you. He is with you. Be strong and do the work, because I am with you, declares the Lord. Therefore, we know that he who began a good work within you will be faithful to carry it out until completion. So let us not become weary in doing good and doing the work, because at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not what? If we do not give up. Listen, if you're discouraged today, remember, God came to you. God made the sacrifice so you could be made right with him. And he's not only just with you, he is in you. And therefore, you can do everything that he calls you to do.